Good morning.
What's going on, Dr. Dre?
How's it going?
Yoo-hoo!
All right, let's see here.
And our fearless leader, Mitch.
Hey, people.
All right.
Hey, Brian.
How are you?
Good.
A couple of familiar faces here, people.
There you go. Hey, guys, I'm going to have one of my scary experiences this weekend in front of about 200 and some odd people. I'm officiating my godson's wedding.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Congrats.
So we're gonna do a little bit of have some fun with this thing. So big shout out to Emily and Kyle. Here we go.
Mitch, you're muted. Matt, what's happening?
Mitch, we can't hear you.
Hold on a second.
There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I have a new setup here at the office. I'm redoing my office, and it was working yesterday, but today it's not working because it's technology, and I'm an expert at technology. So, anyways, well, hey everybody, how we doing? We got anybody else coming in on there, Jay, or are we just us today?
I think it's just us. I'm not seeing, unless I'm missing somebody, but I'm not seeing it.
All right, let me take a quick look real quick.
Okay.
So just a quick little bit of housekeeping. If anybody wants to make a comment, whether it be from the panelists or anybody else on the chat, make sure. Let's see, I'm super loud. Is that what you said, Dennis? I don't know what to do. I'll talk softer. Make sure that you go to all attendees, because a lot of times people they'll post it to just the group, just the panelists, and nobody else is seeing it. Okay. And I don't see anybody else in there that should be on here, so I think we're good to go. So today's topic, and I'm going to lower my volume here because I want Dennis yelling at me. So today's topic is going to be, and I want to change it up a little bit too, because I really want to get you guys' thought process on this, is interest rates and how they're affecting your business right now. And we know that the interest rates are definitely going to be affecting your business, and how are you going to utilize that to create more sales and create more buyers for yourself. But I also want you to think on this line too, because I just had this conversation with a customer, and I'm going to assume there's going to be other conversations about this with regards to Russia invading the Ukraine this morning, and how that's going to, if it does, and how that will affect the market. So since we get Brian on here, we don't get it very often. I want to go to Brian first. So Brian, unmute yourself there, bud, and give us your thoughts. Like, how do you see interest rates affecting us? And then a little tagline on the war that's just happening, if that will affect us at all.
I just heard about the war a minute ago because I went to bed. I'm an old man, and I went to bed at 8 o'clock last night, and I've been on calls all morning. So I don't know. That would not be my expertise, but I can offer you something on interest rates. I had a coaching call this morning. Am I able to share my screen?
Drake, can you give Brian the ability to share a screen?
And I'll show you a visual.
What was that?
Can you have Brian able to share a screen?
Oh, yes. Hang on 1 second.
You have to make him the host, I believe.
Okay.
Okay. So, we're hearing from my clients a lot that buyers are fed up with the multiple offers, the rising prices. They're like, screw this. I'm done. I'm pulling the ripcord. I'll wait till next year. I'll do whatever. Are you guys hearing that from anybody?
Oh, yeah.
We're just gonna put shit on hold, wait for prices to come down. So I had a call with a coaching client this morning, And I scripted this out. It took me a little bit of time, but this highlighted part here. So we're going to use market data to influence the customer, which will create leverage. We're going to speak to the problem that they're experiencing. So that's message to market match. And for Matt and Dennis and Pete and you people on the West Coast, these numbers are going to be even better for you. But I'm talking with somebody in Delaware, you know, like in Craig Lurch's market. So, okay, so Mr. Client, you're going to wait for the interest for prices to come down. So sales price today is 350, rates are 2.5%. Here's your payment, 1382. Let's say prices drop almost 20%. Oh, that'd be great. That'd be great. Really? Would that be great? Prices drop to 300, rates go up to 4.5. Your payment goes up. You moron, you idiot. You're waiting for your monthly payment to be higher. You want to buy when rates are low, not when prices are low. And then according to a recent article I saw yesterday morning, the Fed is anticipating rate increases for the next 9 meetings. And I don't know about the impact of Ukraine and Russia on the global economy, but it can't help, can't make things better. And then properties are still appreciating. So in this market, property values have gone up 10, 15%, but even at 10%, you buy a $350,000 house, next year it's worth 385. Now, Pete, Matt, Dennis, you guys do this in your market, you're talking about big numbers. So it's a nice way to give people a good FU about, I'm waiting for the market to drop. Hope
Hey,
that
Brian,
helps.
can you paste that in the chat?
Will do. Only if you say please, Craig.
Okay, please.
I love you. Of course I will. All right, so hopefully that was helpful. It's great to see everybody here too.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, so that's a great example, Brian. Thanks for sharing that, because I actually never really did that before. So that was really cool. So let's go to Mr. Battiati, only because him and I share the same barber. So Matt, what are your thoughts on all this?
Well, I think with regard to what's happening in the Ukraine, obviously that's going to have a big impact on the global economy. And I think it's going to affect a lot of things, probably make inflation worse. It's going to make, obviously, fuel prices go up, and it's going to probably affect the stock market and so on and so forth. But I think it's really important, and just to reiterate what Brian said, to use stories and examples with clients, because stories are the best way, I think, to persuade people. And so, you know, timing the market is a very difficult thing to do. None of us can do it. I've been saying the market was going to go down for the last 3 years, and I've been completely wrong. But I think the message is, you know, if you're going to be in your house long term, and this is for buyers and sellers, you know, for buyers, if you want to be in that house, and I think Bobby mentioned this one of the previous calls, if you want to be in your house for, you know, if you know you're going to be there for 5 years, you know, you want to seize the day with regard to interest rates. And like Brian said, interest rates are definitely going to be going up. And same thing for sellers. You know, it's a good way to get sellers to, if they're going to, you know, if you don't want to be in that house for the next 5 years, if you're planning on retiring, if you're planning on downsizing, you know, now's the time to sell for the same reason. I definitely have noticed, I don't know if anybody else has noticed this here in San Diego. I've got properties that I'm putting on the market right now where I was expecting a lot more activity, and it's so far, it seems to be, I don't know if it's just because of what's going on with the war in Ukraine, but it seems like maybe it's that a lot of buyers are literally getting just totally frustrated and saying, screw it. Maybe I think that's really is happening across the board, but I'm definitely, it might be a little too early to say, but I'm noticing that all of a sudden the activity has slowed down pretty dramatically on some properties that I put on the market. And I don't know if anybody else is noticing that, but inventory is still super low. Does anybody else noticing that with listings you're putting on the market, that it seems a little slower than it was a few weeks ago?
We're not seeing that here, but I'll tell you what, I think, Matt, it's because everybody from California is moving to Florida. So you should be getting some new inventory shortly. Yeah, we're still days, but it's interesting. We had a customer this morning that was making an offer on a property and pulled the offer this morning because of the attack on the Ukraine. She was doing it as an investment and she got scared. So it'll be interesting to see.
I'm also noticing a lot of buyer's remorse. I'm seeing a lot more accepted offers being canceled by buyers. So for example, the appraisal comes in low, and whereas before the buyers are like, it's no problem, we'll make up the difference, et cetera. We knew it wasn't going to appraise. I'm seeing people, even who had removed an appraisal contingency, canceling because the appraisal came in low and they just aren't willing to do it. So we might be hitting a tipping point where buyers are just finally over it. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of people are going to be saying we're going to wait on the buy side. And I think that interest rate argument is a really good way to get them to stay engaged and stay in the market.
Yeah, and Brian, that's honestly, I'm going to teach that what you just posted there to every one of my agents, because I can't, and I'm so much smarter than I thought I was. I thought I would have gotten that. Craig, how about you guys? What are you seeing up there, and how interest rates? What are your thoughts on it and all this stuff?
Again, I'm going to defer. The bottom line is the Ukraine and Russian thing. God bless them all, and hopefully we all get through this thing. It doesn't catastrophe even more than that. But I also want to go back to when I first got into the business, which was 3 decades ago, 30 some years ago. I came in when the interest rates were 16, 17%. And I said I wanted to sell X amount of houses, and I wanted to sell 50 of them in my first year, and I ended up doing 49. But there was something that was intricate that somebody said to me, what did you do that was different? I said, I didn't do anything. And they said, what do you mean? I said, I only knew what I knew. If you try to sell what you don't have, you can't sell it. If you can't help people with what they don't have, you can't do it. People are always going to need homes. They need shelter, they need water, they need food, all that stuff. It's part of it. It's how we articulate it to it. We are seeing the market pull back. I have sellers that are now saying we were going to wait until the May market when our house was pretty. I'm convincing them to get on the market now, because right now we are in an I know. 2 months from now, we're in an unknown. I don't know that crystal ball. So all I'm doing is trying to bring it to the present and just say, deal with what we know now. Let's not deal with what is in the future. And that's how I've been kind of working with it. Same thing with buyers. But Matt, you're absolutely right. The buyers are at a tipping point. They're at a pissed off point, as I call it. They're like, okay, enough abuse. Now it's my turn to go back and gouge the other side. And when we saw that flip before, when the seller says, oh, I'm going to get the buyers because the buyers were driving our market. Now we're seeing it starting to tip the other way. And I just think bottom line come down to it is not everybody's going to be happy. Everybody's going to grimace a little bit. But in the end, they're going to sell a house, you're going to buy a house, and everybody's going to move on 6 months from now and not even realize what took place. So I guess that answers.
Yeah, that's great. It's great. Brian, you want to tap onto this one? We're talking about, I know you guys came on a little late. We're talking about how interest rates are affecting your market and how you believe they'll affect going forward. And also, if there's any thought process on how the invasion by Russia today affects anything, it's going to affect the global market. Do you think that'll affect you guys locally?
Thank you. First of all, Brian Moses, right? I wanted to agree that I've been doing that exercise with I got into the business in 1985. So this is my 37th year. And I've been through 3 cycles. This is my 3rd. We don't know where we're at in this cycle, but we're in one, And so what I've done is trained agents to let buyers know that if they're on the fence and they think the market's going to drop, you ask them, great, how much would you like it to drop? And then you show the exercise, because we're a payment-driven society unless you're paying all cash for the home. So the exercise that Brian was showing, I would take it one step further, and with a buyer, you need the lender to actually show them the PITI on the offer they just made. If you can show them what that PITI looks like today, if their offer is accepted, you have a greater opportunity to put this deal together when you get a counter offer. Because if you get a counter offer that's a multiple offer and maybe it's $20,000 or $30,000 higher, now you just send that over to your lender, show them the new PITI, and really it's only going to be a very minimal amount in taxes, probably very minimal, if anything, in the insurance, nothing really much in the principal, but the interest rate is going to adjust. And in 2 weeks or a week from presenting an offer to a week later, rates could go up already, and show them a new PITI. Like this counter offer of 30,000, really what this means to you is it's another $97 per month. If rates drop, now you can say, hey, this is good news, because rates are dropping in the last week. And so now this new PITI. So buyers who are putting down 10 or 20% really need to see this exercise so they understand what decision they're making when they go in above or below a counter offer. All right, that's really important. I also do that when I do a counter offer. I call the lender and say, hey, this buyer is a great buyer. We want this buyer, but they're way below, and here's what the seller wants. Can you run them a new PITI and let them know really what this counter offer means to them, because we would love them to step up. Now, the other thing I would do in this market, if there's some newer agents out there, we do this all the time, is we get the seller to give the buyer a buy down increase. So if you've got a counter offer above full price, that's still the market. And Matt, I agree, starting to sit on the market, but we're used to properties selling before they hit the market. Now they're going to take a couple weeks before we see maybe 1 or 2 offers. But that buy down is huge. So if you're in a $700,000 price range and the buyer's putting down 5 or 10%, and the seller is willing to give the buyer a 1% credit to be used for a buy down, they can come up 50 grand and still have a less payment, just because you're buying down the interest rate, because you're buying it down over the whole amount of the loan, not just on the extra money up. So education is huge right now. Everything Brian showed and everything Craig said, I 100% agree. Again, consultations right now with buyers are huge. And I think you really need to walk them one step further into the exercise. Like, here's what this offer really means to you today. It eliminates a lot of remorse, because when the property comes back with some headaches and you're in an as is, release the contingencies, release the appraisal contingencies, you've got to come in with the gap money. If that slows down and it doesn't become the norm still, which it is here in Southern California, then that buyer is going to experience remorse, because the same day the appraisal comes in low and they find out the air conditioner isn't working, now they're going to implode. And you have to let them know that, hey, buyer's remorse is normal. This is what this means to you. Let's go back. Let's talk to your lender. Let's see if we can get you a buy down. Let's come up 10 grand in the price, but let's see if the seller will credit half that back to you so you can buy the interest rate down, and let's make this smart.
That's great. Yep. I love this. Yeah. So this is great stuff. This is why we wanted to talk about this today. Craig, do you have a comment you want to say?
That is huge. I mean, Brian, you hit that buy down. I remember that years and years ago, but you were also saying something about breaking that $97 down. I forget what it's called, but it's actually breaking it down to a ridiculousness that, think about it, it's $100 a month. If you break it into 30 days, that's $3 a day. You go to Starbucks one less time in a week, which theoretically is $6 an event. They say their minimum tab. You multiply that, that's almost a third of the money. So stop going to Starbucks 5 times a week, go 2 times a week, and there's your mortgage payment.
Yeah.
So bring it down to the ridiculous. And thank you for reminding me of that. I totally forgot to break it down that much again.
Okay. Let's see. Dennis, what's your thoughts on all this, buddy?
Yes, sir.
Actually, I want to hear you play the guitar first. Can you pick up your guitar and play for us?
That's not gonna happen. But my coach and good friend Brian Moses, I mean, if I had a microphone, I would just do a mic drop, because he hit the nail on the head. I mean, his graphic that he did is just pure gold with any kind of buyer that you have, right? I went on a listing the other day on a very busy street, and people are hemming and hawing if they're going to sell or not sell. And I kind of told them that, we're expecting 9 rate hikes potentially. And, being on a busy street, your house is kind of like a condo. So when things drop, yours is going to drop more than the people that are not on a busy street. So I kind of use that as some ammunition, and that worked pretty well. Get them to get off the fence. So yeah, I mean, the whole Ukraine Russia thing, I don't think it's going to be, I think people are pretty resilient. I think people are expecting that. The stock market took a little bit of a hit today, but I don't think that's going to be a major thing. I just hope that people, not too many people get killed, right? Because that's the unfortunate part. You have a lot of young soldiers there on both sides. They're going to die, right? And that's what we don't want to see. But unfortunately, that looks like it's going to happen. I think this whole market in general, though, really relies a lot on the stock market. If the stock market craters for whatever reason, I think that's going to put a chill into the real estate market. I think it's directly correlated. Thoughts on that, guys?
Yeah. So I answer one of our panelists. Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting. I've been watching the buyers have definitely been having a change of, not a change of heart, but a change of frustration level.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, they're all like really. I was talking to a couple from one of my newer agents off the cliff the other day, and they're just like, I don't know. We keep looking, and we had one. They came in at one offer. House was listed at 525. They offered 6 and still didn't get it. And they're like, what do we got to do? Then they bought a house out of desperation, and then canceled the next day during the inspection because it totally wasn't the house they wanted for. Randy, what do you got?
So I think the biggest thing for me, I think, regardless of what interest rates are doing, honestly, and this is usually like conversation I have with like some of my good friends when they ask like, oh man, should I buy now? Right, Brian? Like this is something that you always say like, well, the time is always right. Are you ready? Right. And since we are a payment driven society, I really focus on that. And it doesn't even matter what the interest rates are doing at that point. It almost becomes a non-factor. It's more about, okay, well, based on today's rates, if you are talking to your lender, where are you at? What's your monthly budget you're comfortable with? Because the next question I would ask, like, well, what are you planning on doing in this property? Are you planning on living there for what? Right. And if they say, well, I want to, sell in 2 years and take advantage of this appreciation, then I would honestly tell them, if this was my friend, I'm like, look, well, I wouldn't tell anybody, not even my family member, to hope that this will continue and buy, and in 2 years you're gonna make and sell this house and make all this equity. And that's a bad way to get into a property and a nightmare. So I was like, so I would rather have you think that, hey, if you buy this property, if the market does drop, then can you see yourself living in this property for the next 7 to 10 years? And if so, then go for it if it's monthly budget driven, which it is for all of us, unless, again, you're a cash buyer. Then I take it a step further. I go, okay, so imagine in 2-3 years, you're living in this house and this isn't the perfect home yet, but you bought it because you're like, you know what, I don't want to rent, right? And I'm comfortable with the monthly payment based on this interest rate that it is, whatever it is today, right? Now you're like, you know what, man, I would rather maybe try to find something else. I'm like, well, let's assume that moment is now, because that's all we can really base our decisions on. Like, what do we know today, right? So let's assume it's 3 years from today. Now, what's the rents at? Like, if you were to rent your property that you just bought, how much can you get rent today for that same property that you just bought? Let's assume you did. And then let's also remind you that when we had the last crash, rents actually didn't go down. So most buyers don't actually even know that, right? Because I'm like, look, I was in that market, and someone like Brian and Craig, they've been in that 3 times. I was in it once. I got into the market when it was totally distressed. I learned how to do short sales. I was an REO agent. I was placing people in homes that were losing their homes so they could go and rent somewhere. And I had to tell landlords, future landlords, and tell them, look, this client lost their home to a short sale. I wrote a letter on behalf as their agent that they're really good people, so the landlord could actually take them as a tenant, right? Even though their credit was shot. So I isolated the situation. The reason I bring that up is most people don't even realize that when things are going south and people are losing homes, which at some point is going to happen again, rents actually end up going up or staying very strong. So with that said, I take them through that exercise. I'm like, look, so if you buy this home and the rent is X, how much would you have to either bring to the table, or maybe you'll make some money or break even based on the monthly mortgage payment PITI today, if you were to buy it? Well, then it starts becoming real. I'm like, okay, so then imagine it's equal. Imagine you can even break even. And we didn't even take into account that rents will go up, right, every year, for the next 3 years. I'm like, I'm just basing it on today, right? But what if you actually have to bring $500 to the table if you wanted to sell that property, and you're like, wait, I don't want to sell this property because the market dropped by 50,000. Okay, well, what if you kept the property and you actually gave $500 towards your principal and mortgage because the rent doesn't cover all of it? But guess what? Now you can go and buy a home that you want at the $50,000 less price point. How many 500 monthly payments that you would have to make the difference up? How many years will that take you for that 50,000 that you're now getting a deal on because the market dropped 3 years from now? And then it starts setting in like, wait a minute. So you're saying I have an exit strategy even if the market doesn't drop. I have an exit strategy if the market does drop. I have a strategy even that if the market drops and I want to move, I still can. Yes, you can, because everything is monthly budget and how much, and it's all numbers. So I go really deep sometimes too deep, right? But I think, with certain people that I'm like really good friends with, I can go really deep, and then I see the light bulb go off, and then they're no longer even looking at like, oh man, the interest rates are going up, I shouldn't buy right now. It's more like, what is my monthly payment? And then they understand what I just told them, and I show them their rents, so they actually can compare and contrast against their monthly payment for the mortgage. So I don't know if that all makes sense. It's a lot that I threw out there, but I go deep. I really go deep.
So basically, if you do a really good job confusing the heck out of them, they'll just buy. So, it's funny, and I'll chat for a couple seconds on this, and I want to get really more on the listing side and how, because we haven't really talked about that. We're just talking about buyers here. But I think what's happened I've been doing this for a while. All of us on this panel have been doing this for a while. I've been doing this 21 years. So I think I'm like one of the babies in the group. But I think we've had this false sense of like 3% interest rates are normal, right? And over the last, 5, 6, 7, 8 years now. I mean, when I got in the business in 2001, it was 8%. When I first bought my first house, Craig, it was 14%, and didn't care. And by the percentage, like we're all talking about, means absolutely nothing. It's really what is the payment, right? That's all what people really care about. And so I think part of this is really having a good, solid conversation with your customers from a buyer's perspective and explaining what Brian's saying, what Randy's saying, on explaining the numbers. And again, I'll go back to Brian. I just emailed me that whole thing that you put down there, so I don't forget to talk about all my agents. But we really have to spend some time educating people on history. And people still bought when it was 18%. Some of us remember that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dre, who's on there for Pete right now, doesn't remember that because she wasn't born yet. But when it was 18%, people still bought houses. I bought my first house at 14%. I was like, yes, I got a great deal. I got a great rate. And all I cared about for my $150,000 house, it was $2,000 a month, I think, back then. So having that communication, and in the end, everybody still needs a place to live. So are you going to buy? And this goes back to what Randy just, are you going to buy? Are you going to rent? What does the dollars look like? What does it make sense? You're right. I mean, rents don't go down as much as houses go down when we have any type of correction. And I don't think we're going to see what we saw in 2007, 8, 9, 10. I don't think that's happening because it's different. It's different because the interest rates are going up. It's not because of all the false stuff that we had back in the day with the mortgage-backed securities being sold, which caused the last crash. So I want to hit on for the next, we got a little more time here. I want to hit on what's the conversation you're having with your sellers now with interest rates going up and people that are prospectively selling, because we do know, theoretically, interest rates go up, prices come down a little bit, right? So Brian, I'm going to start back with you again, man. So on a seller, what's the conversation look like to the seller about, interest rates are going up. You haven't listed yet. You've been talking about listing. Where do you go from there?
Let me see if I can share my screen again. I actually wanted to volunteer this. So if I can be host again, I wrote another script just for this.
Okay, let me see if Jay, you still there?
I got it.
Oh, there you go, Cole. He's so
Okay,
good.
this was for a California agent. So you can obviously adjust the pricing. It doesn't matter, but agents are telling me sellers are getting greedy. The market says that my house is worth 4.2. Let's list it at 5 and see what happens. So I don't know if you're experiencing that, but we need to have a strategy to offset this overpricing. And Matt said, I've got houses that are sitting on the market, which is unbelievable. It hasn't happened. So my strategy to set the price lower, which will increase the demand and ultimately get the property likely sold over asking price, you review the comps with them. Your last comp is where you want them to be. And then my language is this. As we've talked about, Mr. Seller, price is a function of supply and demand. And the more demand you get, the better price you'll receive. It's pretty basic. It's pretty simple. Does that make sense? Yeah, well, Brian, we'd like to list it at 5 million and see what happens. Okay, well, hold that thought. But if we can put you in the driver's seat as a seller and generate multiple offers, 5, 10, 15, 20 or more, that would give you an advantage, wouldn't it? And when you're in a position to pick and choose the buyer, that's also an advantage, right? Are you more likely to get a better price when you have multiple offers? Are you more likely to get better terms when you have multiple offers? Now, Mr. Seller, asking the highest price doesn't equate to getting the highest price. Does that make sense? Well, I'm not really sure. Well, let me give you an example. If it made sense, we'd ask $20 million for your house, right? What would happen, Matt, if we asked $20 million for your house? We'd get no activity. Nobody would look at it. Is that what we want? So the opposite is actually true. If we price your home well below market, say 1 million, okay, we're looking at comps for 4.2. If we price your house for 1 million, what would happen? How much interest would you get? Well, Brian, we'd get tons of interest. Lots of interest creates lots of competition, right? Is competition good or bad? Competition's good. The more buyers you have fighting over your home, the better price and terms you're going to get. Do you follow me? And then I like to use metaphors. I think it was, I don't know who said it, but it was brilliant. Stories. Matt said it, tell stories. So I was just watching the Barrett-Jackson Auto Show last week with my kid. And I was blown away by what cars sold for. So I can use this metaphor and say, Mr. Seller, have you ever seen the Barrett-Jackson Auto Show? Do you know what that is? No. Well, let me show you what that is. It's an auction every year in Arizona, and they sell cars for ridiculous amounts of money. Look at this 1954 Pontiac that sold for $3.80 million, $3,080,000. Look at this 54 Oldsmobile that sold for 3.3 for a car. It's nuts, right? Any ideas or guesses where the bidding started? It started at $100,000 and it sold for 3.4 million. So what can we learn from this, Mr. Seller? People want what they can't have. Is that a good strategy or a bad strategy to create that type of demand and competition? Let me show you how this happens in real estate. And then I showed them a property that was listed for 3.5 million and it sold for 4.5 million or something ridiculous, right? So I'm connecting the dots. So I'll copy this, put it in the chat. Everybody can copy it. And hopefully that helps.
That's great. I love this. Very cool. Matt, where's Matt? Matt, you look like you're in a throne there, but what you deal with a lot of sellers. So what's the conversations look like with the interest rates going up?
Well, what I'm doing is I'm going back to, what I said earlier. I'm talking to a lot of past clients, and when I talk with sellers, because everybody, of course, the big issue right now is nobody has anywhere to go, right? So, but my thing I keep going over and over again with all my sellers who are on the fence about selling right now, because again, a lot of them, we always find out what's going on with the market long before our clients do, right? So when the market, in the past, when we've gone into a down cycle, for example, you're talking to sellers and they still believe that the market's going like gangbusters, right? And you really have to educate them. So what I'm going over and over again with all my clients right now is, do you want to be in this house for the next 5 years? If you don't want to be in the house for the next 5 years, and I always use demographics too, in addition to interest rates, but if you don't want to be in this house for the next 5 years, you ought to capitalize on the market and sell now, right? And for San Diego, and I think, even on the national level, markets are we always go in cycles. And so San Diego, I did an interview yesterday with one of the TV stations, and I said, I've charted the market retroactively in San Diego for the last 50 years. I haven't been in real estate for 50 years, but you can go back and plug the numbers in, and we do these cycles, right? And we're on a really long upcycle, even on a national level right now. The market in general, I would say, here in San Diego and around the country bottomed out. In other words, it started to recover in 2012. And normally, we do max 6-7 year up and down cycles. Well, this is a 10-year cycle we're on. So this market's been going up literally for 10 years, which is unprecedented. And so I always go back and I draw like a roller coaster. I say, we had a peak in 80, we had a bottom in 84, we had a peak in 90, we had a bottom in 96. We were due for another peak in 2001, but then guess what happened? 9/11 happened and the Fed dropped interest rates. And we went up from 2001 all the way to 2006. And then we dropped like a rock from 2006 until 2012. Well, we're on a 10-year upcycle right now. There's no way, in my opinion, I'm not saying it's going to crash like it did in 2008, but nothing goes up forever. And what I tell my clients is, the longer this continues, the more dramatic the drop is going to be. So if you don't want to be in that house for the next 5 years, and the biggest segment of our population, to get back to demographics, the biggest segment of our population is the baby boomers. And my opinion is that when the baby boomers start to see that the market is starting to go down, right, that it's starting to moderate, they're all going to put their homes on the market. And we're going to go from having very, very low inventory to having a lot of inventory. And as Brian said, it's supply and demand. Brian, you've got a great line that you taught me years ago, which you used a little bit there, which is price as a function of demand price is a function of demand, right? So it's all supply and demand. So I tell my clients, in fact, I just texted a client of mine who's been messaging me on Facebook saying, we're thinking about selling. We might want to wait longer. I said, and talk about stories. I said, look, I'm on a mastermind call right now with top agents all over the country, and everybody's kind of noticing the same thing, that something seems to be happening with the market. So if you don't want to be in that house for the long term, you should, if you want my opinion, now is a great time to sell it. So I think the 5-year example is really good, because the majority of people that are retirement age do not want to be in the house that they're in for the next 5 years. And so I think it's a really good way to get people off the fence.
Yeah, absolutely. Craig, what about you, bud?
Matt, I love that, how you were texting. I'm sitting here and you were just saying that. I'm like, all right, I have 3 clients. I'm going to call right now and use that 5-year scenario too. The sellers, and again, I'm in a cul-de-sac for a second. The question was how we're dealing with the interest rates with the sellers. Exactly. As the interest rates go up, your property is going to become stagnant. It's just reversing it to the buyers. But I think it's really a good chance for us to pull the guys off the fence who have been saying, I'm going to wait, I want to do this. Well, why let's do this while the market has demand of some pent-up buyers still, before the interest rates go up, and then you see it. So I'll be honest, in the past 45 minutes, the dialogues that have just gone flying by on this, I'm picking the phone up to 5 clients right after this, and I'm using them. So thank you.
That's great.
Awesome. So thank you.
Well, that's why we do this, right? This is for not just our 62 people that are seeing this right now, on top of the probably another 500 plus we'll see on the tribe, but also for us, right? We all become better by these panels. I mean, that's what I've been loving these things. So I'm going to welcome Jennifer to the panel. She's never been with us before. Hi, Jen. And I'd love to get your thoughts on interest rates and how they're affecting your market and how they're affecting you and how you're using that to help your business. Yeah, you got to unmute yourself. You're muted. There you go. Where are you still? I don't think she can hear you. You're muted. Yeah. There you go.
Okay. I'm kind of frozen in and out on my side, so hopefully you guys can actually see me over here. Thanks for inviting me on the panel. It's great to see everybody, sure. All the smiling faces. You know, I got a lot of opinions about what's going on in real estate and a lot of curiosity about the marketplace right now. I personally think they've kept interest rates artificially low for way too long, which has created a lot of the issues that we're running into. And I'm concerned a lot about, it's kind of an off topic, but related, the institutional investors that are buying up large portions of single family housing right now. I think that's a big issue that a lot of us aren't paying enough attention to. Interest rate wise, having that conversation and using those visuals for clients, because I have this conversation with every single buyer, because I am hearing a lot about, you know, well, we're going to wait. What do you think the market's going to do? Well, I hope the market slows down, because, you know, when we're getting 20 offers and it's getting overbid and everybody's removing all contingencies up front, you know, that puts us as realtors at a lot of risk with regards to the problems that buyers can run into and the counsel that we have to give them to get offers accepted. I feel uncomfortable. I had a buyer yesterday say, we want to remove inspection contingency. I've never done that with a single buyer that wasn't an investor that, you know, had a contractor come in. I think a buyer deserves the right to see the condition of their home before they move in, you know, with regards to a professional inspection. So I get a little bit nervous about the exposure with regards to compliance and doing my fiduciary obligation to my clients in a market like this. So personally, I hope it slows the market down just a little bit, but the visuals of showing what the monthly payment is, and in the end, as has already been said, that's really all buyers care about, is what is my monthly payment going to be? So I also have a conversation of, as we talked about, the rent versus buy. What are current rents? What are current market rents? How much control do you have over that in any market and what we've seen? And what I know to be true is that we have enough hedge funds and institutional investors that are realizing that all of the fiat currency that has been printed in the past 2 years, past 10 years, whatever, has to go somewhere. And those that have that money want to put it in real assets, because they know that the stock market is not the place for their money to be. So we've only got so many real assets: gold, silver, real estate, commodities. And so a lot of that money is going into real estate. They're building entire neighborhoods that are rental neighborhoods only. And then they're packaging those and selling them for multiple billions of dollars. Blackstone just invested and bought what? 56,000 or something like that apartments. So the reason I say this is because they control the rental inventory, and they control a lot more of the pricing in the local marketplace, which puts for more uncertainty for those people who choose not to buy a house. So I counsel my buyers all day long that it's still a great time to buy a house. My first interest rate was 8.5%. Second one was 10. They always laugh when I tell them that. They're like, oh my God, 10%. Who could ever afford that? And of course, we all remember the days of 17 and 21%. My dad was a colonel in the Army. We got transferred literally every single year, and every single year we would buy a house. So I was raised that real estate is the easiest way for the average man to attain wealth in their lifetime. It's just in the past 10 years, everybody has turned their house into an ATM. Your house is not an asset. Your house is a liability. Your rental properties are assets, but your house is not. It's a liability, like your car payment and everything else. We have just raised a whole generation of children that think, or young adults that have been trained that a house is an asset. It's an ATM. It's always going to go up. So it's a hard conversation to have, and it takes a lot of education with my buyers to make them see outside of, you know, HGTV life. But in the end, having your money out of the bank in an inflationary environment, if you have 100,000 in the bank, it's worth 75,000 now. If you want to use the dollar store, is now $1.25. So in my opinion, cash sitting in a bank is like ice cubes melting on a sidewalk. And if I got an opportunity to buy now, I'm going to continue to buy real estate all day long, especially if I can control other people's money at 4, 4.25, 5. I don't care. Positive cash flow with regards to investment and ownership. Definitely. I think it's still a great time for buyers to buy.
Yep, I agree. Good stuff. Good stuff. And welcome on the panel. Brian, your thoughts on from a seller's perspective with interest rates?
With interest rates,
How
well,
are you using that? How are you using that to help you secure more listings?
yeah. What can I do to put a period on the buyer side real quick? Because I love what she said.
Sure, of course.
One of the, so I didn't get a chance to finish this. What Randy was saying earlier, a great question that we ask is to a buyer is, are you buying this property for an investment or for security? And if they don't know the answer to that, the way you explain that is security is a home that you don't have an military or something. They're here for 4 years and they want to get out. That's a different strategy on the acquisition. Now you got to show them, right? But here's what I let people know. Whether you're buying a home for security or for an investment, or you're just going to wait and rent and sit on the fence, I want you to know one thing. You're paying a mortgage, whether you're renting or owning. If you're renting, it's just not your own mortgage, right? So the difference is that you might be losing $30,000 or $40,000 a year in a tax write-off, and that far hurts you in the long run. So if your house goes underwater, but you hold it for 5 more years and you have a negative payment, the principal buy down, the equity buy down, and the tax break is still going to be a positive if you can sustain the monthly payment. So it's really something that you have to walk them through. But we're in a market here in San Diego, and I don't know, Matt, you can chime in on this, and most of you probably are not aware of what we have here, but we have an MLS system here that allows us, when we're talking to a seller, so I can show the seller the current comps, and I give them a number I know I can defend based on the comps right now. So if I can defend this number, but the market begins to adjust up or down, we have a luxury system here called variable rate marketing. We can put a value range in our MLS. Our MLS says, yes or no, is this a variable rate or variable marketing property, a value range market? And if I have a number I can defend, and let's just use $1 million, and there's a couple pending that look like they might drive the price up to $1.05 million as an example, but the market starts to shift and it looks like we might drop to 900 or 950. What we can do is, well, why don't we do this, Mr. Seller or Mrs. Seller, or both of you? We're going to price your property that you're going to entertain offers in a price range. Our MLS allows us to put that in there, and it says value range marketing by the seller, meaning that you don't have to accept an offer at the low end, and you might get a number above the high end because we could undervalue it, like the example that Brian Moses was sharing. But in our MLS, we can put seller is entertaining offers between 950 and $1 million. The seller doesn't have to look at offers below 950 if they don't want to, but we're hoping to get offers above $1.05 million, which is the market we're still in here. So how you use that in your own MLS system outside of San Diego, this was actually introduced to the California MLS system back in 2001 when 9/11 hit. And after 9/11, we weren't sure what prices we're going to do. So a guy named Steve Games, he fought like crazy. He was a big Prudential California guy, and then he sold out to Berkshire Hathaway. But what he did was he introduced this out of Australia, and he fought and spent a ton of money, and it's never gone away. So if I were to come over and show you comps today, half the comps I'll show you are a property that sold that was being offered to the market with a value range. Like, hey, here's the marketing. Here's what we know. Here's what we can defend. Here's what we're hoping for, but here's what could happen. This is reality. And today we have that opportunity. How you use that in your marketplace might just be in the consultation. You might just say, we're in a market where here's the number I can defend. And we're hoping for this because it's not a greedy seller. It's actually what the market, the buyers are pushing the prices to. It feels like the seller's greedy, but really this is just what other buyers are doing right now. They're pushing values so high because they're so upset and so beat up that they're willing to do things that they weren't willing to do on their first couple offers. But today, here in San Diego, we're seeing buyers still bid properties up. Makes the seller look greedy, but really what that is that's just another buyer who's frustrated pushing the market. It will slow down, and when it slows down, now we have to control our seller's attitude and say, hey, listen, that market has shifted. We're no longer seeing everything that's pending. I call the pending agents. I make sure that I find out, is that property when it closes in the MLS gonna trend up or trend down? Usually they'll say, Brian, we're at full price, or maybe we're a little above, or maybe we're 1 or 2% below. Good. I need to know that. Comps, here's what I know. When these close, they're going to be about 2% below. We should price your property today closer to where those are going to close ahead of time so we can take advantage of why they're in escrow. We still have hot buyers running around offering full price.
Cool, good stuff. Randy, same question.
Yeah, I would just, because all these things that Brian is talking about are amazing strategies that you can apply once you get them to agree that selling today is still okay. And I think let's get to the core of the question maybe is how do you use the interest rate situation of fluctuation to get them off the fence of maybe if they're not, or maybe the market will go a little higher, right? So then I think let's use the interest rates to let them know, right? Hey, no, I don't know if that's the best idea, because the only thing that I try not to do is guarantee anything, right? Because like Matt Badia said, like I've been thinking that the market is going to go down for the last 3 years as well. So I never say, look, all I can base it on is just based on previous logic, right? And usually when interest rates go up, at some point, inventory will start going down. However, with that in mind, right now, interest rates, yes, they're going up. And what is happening in many cases, I believe, is FOMO. So the buyers that are flocking to the market right now in this month, 2, we don't know for how long. I feel that we're experiencing FOMO. If I was you, Mr. Seller, I would want to be on that side of taking advantage of the buyers that have FOMO and they want to get in the market before the rates go even higher, right? So I would use that to make them list today instead of 3 months from now, right? Because we just don't know what's going to happen in 3 months. We might have a price adjustments. We might have, we don't know. We honestly don't. I just try to base it, look, here's what we know today. Here's where the interest rates are. And I feel we're experiencing FOMO. If I was you, I would get in now. So we have multiple offers. And then I would apply all the things that Brian Yarbrough was talking about and the other guys here on the call and Jennifer, like I would apply those strategies then, of course, about pricing, right? Because we also don't want to overprice it. But that's my 2 cents on the interest rates and sellers.
Yeah, I would say, based on, what we're doing here in my market, and I think I've talked about this before when we've had some of our listing calls, but interest rates right now are a great time to talk to your investors who bought several years ago and saying, look, we're peaking in our price right now, most likely. I always say the crystal ball. I have was that black 8 ball we used to have and shake? And they used to say yes and no, and mine always said no to me. For some reason, I don't know why. But the reality is people who bought during the low period several years ago now have the opportunity to create an amazing profit if they sell right now. Because generally speaking, and we don't know what this market, because this is the weirdest market. I don't think any of us have ever seen this type of market before. At least I haven't. If you bought a house for $70,000 in 2012, that house is now $350,000 here locally. So reaching out to those investors, those non-occupied homes, and saying, look, this is a great time to maximize your profit center right now, profits on that property, because interest rates are going to go up, which will bring the prices down at some point. We've got about 3 more minutes left. Before we call, I just want to open up to any questions that we might have. Anybody want to post a question in there Or if any of the
Brian
panelists have,
not Brian Moses. I just saw a question from someone, Robert. People are playing with, no, that's not it. Where is Robert's question? Robert Wolf. What are everyone's thoughts about agents raising the list price of the house during the negotiations? Why is this done? Appraiser, question mark. My quick answer is yes, I've done that myself. When I've gotten, offers 50, 100,000 above list, I would adjust the list price. Because I do believe it might have an impact on appraisal. Will it? Who knows? But I just do it.
that makes sense.
Anybody else want to answer?
Any other questions from anybody? We got 2 more minutes left. Does it affect the appraiser or the comps of the comps? I'll answer that because I think appraisers really look at the list price because they know we do our homework, and I think they actually do. They do that, and we had an interesting thing yesterday where a property appraised for 490, but we know the comps actually make it about 550. And the reason why they appraised at 490 because that was the number that it went under contract for. So I think when they see a number, that's the number that they're shooting for. Would you guys agree?
And then I would bring the other offers, the front pages of all the offers to the appraiser, and the proof is in the pudding, and a house is worth what people are willing to pay. And if I have 5, 10 people willing to pay this price, that's the value. I underlisted it, Mr. Appraiser. I'm sorry, but here's the value, right? So we bring that to the appraisal. It's never been more important to meet the appraiser at the property than today.
Absolutely, no question, because everything is, very few of our properties are appraising at value, so you need to give them as much ammunition as possible, correct? One last question we have here. How do you overcome sellers who don't want to sell because they're locked in at 2.63% on their interest rate on their current home, and the rate will increase their new buy? Brian, that's probably a really good answer for you, right? Are you there? Yeah.
Which Brian?
So you have a seller who's currently has a rate of 2.63. Now they're looking to go buy a new house that's going to be 4%. How do you get that seller to move on selling their home to go buy another home?
Well, we don't have a crystal ball, your magic 8 ball, and we don't know what rates are going to be 12 months from now. But at 4%, this is your payment. At 6%, if rates continue to go up as the Fed's predicting over the next 9 meetings, your payment is this. So you're actually saving money. You want to get the lower interest rate. You don't want interest rates to go up. So I would use that same analogy.
And now, I think it comes down to also why? Why are they even thinking about moving? And what is there a pain associated with them staying where they are? Because if there's a big enough pain for them staying where they are, then what's an extra % or 2?
Right.
On an interest?
Good point, Randy.
I think we need more about that. And I just want to say, Mitch, I posted something. We don't have time to go into it, but if you guys can download the Word doc, I just posted at 9:56 a.m. How much more pain can buyers take? That is an eye-opening article that I saw, and we don't have time to go into it. But if you read it and you use it, it's going to blow your mind to make you realize that buyers actually have a lot more room to go with pain with what's happening. Anyway, I'll finish on that.
I agree with that. All right, everybody, we got 1 o'clock, time to get off. Thanks everybody for being on the panel. And, I love these things. It's so helpful to everybody. We had 62 people on here this morning. And we'll be back next Thursday. And have an awesome week, everybody.
Later.
Bye.